My brother laughed when I arrived in my used sedan, asking if my clerk salary couldn't afford a real car like his. He didn't know that just hours earlier, I was debriefing the president on the very financial syndicate that was about to bankrupt our entire family in this story of revenge and betrayal. My name is Emilia Bailey. To the outside world, and specifically to the Bailey dynasty, I am the gray sheep of the family. Not the black sheep. Black sheep are interesting. Black sheep are rebels. I was just gray, beige, dull. For the last 6 years, my family has believed that I work as a low-level administrative assistant at the Department of Agriculture, filing reports on crop yields and corn subsidies. They believe I live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment because I cannot afford better. They believe I am single because I am too married to my mundane, paper-pushing job to meet anyone of status. The truth is a very different animal. I pulled my 2016 Honda Civic into the driveway of my parents' sprawling estate in Connecticut. The gravel crunched beneath my tires, a sound that usually signaled the beginning of a 4-hour migraine. Parked near the fountain were the true indicators of success, at least according to the Bailey metric. There was my brother Julian's brand new Porsche 911 GT3 gleaming in an obnoxious shade of shark blue. Next to it sat my sister Clara's Range Rover, customized with matte black wrap, and of course my father's Bentley, the flagship of the fleet. I parked my car off to the side, near the service entrance, partially out of habit and partially because I knew my mother would have a fit if my eyesore was visible in the background of the photos she planned to take. I took a deep breath, checking my internal mental state. It is a technique I learned at the farm and perfected in safe houses in Beirut and Kiev. Compartmentalization. I locked away the classified briefing I had just delivered at the White House. I locked away the fact that my Civic was actually a heavily modified vehicle with bulletproof glass, run-flat tires, and a chassis reinforced to withstand an IED. I locked away the reality that I was a GS-15 senior operations officer for the Central Intelligence Agency's Financial Crimes Division, tasked with dismantling state-sponsored economic terrorism. I stepped out of the car, transforming into Emilia the clerk. I rounded my shoulders slightly. I adjusted my glasses. I put on a polite, slightly anxious smile. Julian was waiting on the porch, a scotch in hand. He was 32, 2 years older than me, and the golden boy of the family tech empire. He wore a suit that cost more than what he thought I made in a year. "Nice ride, Em," he called out, his voice dripping with that specific brand of sibling condescension that sounds like a joke but feels like a slap. "Still driving the toaster? I thought government jobs had great benefits. Can't you at least lease something that doesn't look like it was involved in a hit and run?" I walked up the steps, clutching my purse, which contained a Glock 19 and an encrypted satellite phone, tightly to my chest. "It gets me from point A to point B, Julian," I said softly. "Besides, it's reliable." "Reliable is code for boring," he laughed, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard. "Come on inside. Dad's opening a bottle of the 82 Petrus. Try not to mention how much your rent went up, okay? Let's keep the mood light." I followed him into the foyer. The house smelled of expensive lilies and old money. My mother, Catherine, drifted toward me. She was a woman who treated aging not as a natural process, but as a personal insult to be fought with surgery and starvation. "Emilia," she sighed, offering me her cheek to kiss. "You look tired. Is the filing piling up? You know, I was talking to the Johnsons, and their daughter just got promoted to VP of Marketing at L'Oreal. She travels to Paris twice a month." "That sounds lovely, Mother," I said, playing my part. "I'm just busy. It's harvest season reporting time. Lots of spreadsheets." Clara, my younger sister, emerged from the living room. At 24, she was an influencer with 3 million followers and an ego to match. She scanned my outfit, a simple navy dress from a department store rack. "Oh, honey," she said, tilting her head, "we really need to go shopping. You dress like a librarian who gave up on life. It's making me sad just looking at you." "I'm comfortable, Clara," I muttered, walking past them into the dining room. Dinner was the usual torture. My father, Robert Bailey, sat at the head of the table. He was the CEO of Bailey Global, a logistics and shipping conglomerate that had been in the family for 3 generations. He was a man who respected power, and in his eyes, I had none. "So, Emilia," my father boomed as the soup was served, "still pushing paper? Any exciting news from the world of corn subsidies?" "Actually, we're working on digitizing the archive from the—" I began, knowing he would cut me off. "Fascinating," he interrupted, turning immediately to Julian. "Now, son, tell me about the merger with Omnicorp. I heard the stock jumped 6 points today." Julian beamed, launching into a monologue about synergies and market caps. I ate my soup in silence, watching them. It was strange. I loved them because they were my blood, but I didn't like them. They were vain, superficial, and dangerously naive. They had no idea that the Omnicorp merger Julian was bragging about was a front.
If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe. Also, please comment, as your feedback helps to improve the stories coming.
They didn't know that Bailey Global was being targeted by the Obsidian Syndicate, a transnational criminal organization I had been hunting for 3 years. Obsidian didn't just buy companies, they hollowed them out, used them to launder drug money in arms deals, and then collapsed them, leaving the original owners to take the fall for the crimes. I had tried to warn my father 6 months ago. I had told him to be careful with new investors, to vet his partners. He had laughed in my face, telling me that I didn't have the business acumen to understand high finance, so I had to protect them from the shadows. I had been building a case, using my clearance to monitor the syndicate's infiltration of my father's company. I was the only thing standing between my family and federal prison, or worse, a shallow grave. And here they were, mocking the very shield that protected them. The conflict began in earnest 3 weeks after that dinner. I remember the date clearly because it was the day the illusion of the Bailey Empire began to crack. I was at my desk at Langley, reviewing intercepted communications from a server in Estonia. The chatter confirmed it. Obsidian was ready to pull the trigger. They were going to drain Bailey Global's accounts, transfer the debt to my father's personal name, and frame him for a massive embezzlement scheme involving sanctions evasion. My secure line rang. It was my mother. "Emilia, you need to come home." She sounded frantic. "Something is happening. There are people here." I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my go bag, signaled my team lead that I was moving to field containment, and sprinted to my car. I made the drive in record time, weaving through traffic with precision driving that would have terrified my brother. When I arrived, the gates were open. 2 black SUVs were parked in the driveway, not government, private security, but not the friendly kind. I walked into the house to find chaos. My father was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. Julian was pacing, screaming into his phone. Clara was crying in the corner, clutching her Pomeranian. And standing in the center of the room were 2 men in suits I recognized. They weren't police. They were lawyers for the syndicate, though my family didn't know that. They were holding a stack of documents. "What is going on?" I asked, keeping my voice trembling and small, maintaining my cover even in the crisis. Julian spun around, his face red. "Dad's accounts are frozen. Everything. The bank says we're over-leveraged. These vultures are saying we owe $50 million in immediate call options. They're seizing the assets." One of the suits, a man with a shark-like grin named Mr. Sterling, stepped forward. "It is not just the options, Mr. Bailey. There are irregularities in the shipping manifests, evidence of smuggling. If we go to the authorities, you go to prison for 20 years. But if you sign over the deed to the company and the estate to cover the losses, we can make the irregularities disappear." My father looked up, his face gray. "I didn't do it. I never smuggled anything." "It doesn't matter what you did," Sterling said smoothly. "It matters what the paperwork says. And the paperwork says you are a criminal. You have 24 hours to sign, or we release the files to the FBI." The men left, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. "This is a nightmare," my mother sobbed. "We'll lose the house. We'll lose the club membership. Where will we go?" Julian threw his phone against the wall. "They played us. Omnicorp was a shell. They raided the liquidity and left us holding the bag." I stepped forward cautiously. Dad, don't sign anything. We can fight this. We can get a lawyer. Julian laughed, a harsh, barking sound. A lawyer? With what money, Emilia? They froze the accounts. We can't even buy groceries right now. Do you have $50 million in your checking account, Miss File Clerk? I bit my tongue. Actually, I could have authorized a black budget operation that would make $50 million look like pocket change, but I couldn't say that yet. Maybe I can help with some cash for a hotel? I offered. Oh, great, Clara snapped. Emilia is going to save us with her coupon savings. What do you have? $2,000? That won't even cover the storage unit for my shoes. They were drowning, and they were still spitting on the lifeguard. The next 2 days were a slow-motion car crash. The bank foreclosed on the house immediately due to clauses in the loan I knew the syndicate had planted. The cars were repossessed. I watched from the window as the tow truck hook lifted Julian's Porsche. He stood in the driveway, weeping like a child. We had to move into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The transition from a 10-bedroom estate to 2 cramped rooms with neon signs buzzing outside was jarring for them. For me, it was luxury compared to some of the holes I'd slept in during ops in the Middle East. But the abuse didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. Their fear manifested as anger, and I was the safest target. I can't believe we're eating pizza, my mother complained, picking at a slice on the motel bed. Emilia, couldn't you have at least bought us salads? I'm doing my best, Mom, I said, typing furiously on my laptop. I was actually coordinating with a tactical team, arranging the entrapment of Sterling and his bosses. Your best is pathetic, Julian sneered from the other bed. You've been working for years, and you have nothing to show for it. No connections, no savings. If you had actually been ambitious, maybe you'd know a judge or a senator who could help us. But no, you just file papers. You're useless, Emilia, completely useless. My father, usually the loudest, was silent. He looked broken. He was staring at the wall, mumbling about prison. I closed my laptop. The sting of their words was sharp, but the trap was set. I have a meeting, I said, standing up. A meeting? Clara scoffed. With who? The library board? With the people doing this to us, I said. The room went silent. What are you talking about? My father asked, looking up. I called the number on the card Mr. Sterling left. I told him we're ready to sign. I told him to meet us at the old warehouse district office, the one property they haven't seized yet because it's in my name from when Grandpa died. You did what? Julian screamed. You stupid girl! You can't negotiate with them. You'll get us killed. I'm not negotiating, I said calmly. I'm ending this. Get dressed. We're going. They argued. They screamed. They called me every name in the book. But they had no choice. They were broken, and I was the only one with a plan, even if they thought it was a suicide mission. We drove to the old warehouse in my Civic. The 4 of us packed in tight. The suspension groaned, but the car handled it. When we arrived, the warehouse was dark. We walked into the main office floor. Sterling was there, sitting at a folding table, flanked by 4 armed guards. He looked smug. So, the family arrives, Sterling smiled. And look, the little mouse brought the big cats. My father stepped forward, his hands shaking. Mr. Sterling, please, I need more time. Time is up, Robert, Sterling said, sliding a dossier across the table. Sign the confession, sign the asset transfer, or my friends here will take you for a ride you won't come back from, and then we'll have fun with your daughters. My mother screamed. Julian wetted himself. I saw the dark stain spread on his trousers. Clara hid behind me. I stepped out from behind my father. He's not signing anything, I said. My voice was different now. The tremble was gone. The clerk was gone. Sterling looked at me and laughed. And who are you, the secretary? Go sit in the corner, honey, before you get hurt. I didn't move. I am Emilia Bailey, and you are trespassing on federal property. Sterling's brow furrowed. What? I checked my watch. 1,400 hours exactly. I looked Sterling in the eye. Arthur Sterling, real name Mikhail Petrov, wanted in 3 countries for money laundering, racketeering, and the assassination of a judge in Naples. You are currently operating as a front for the Obsidian Syndicate. The room went dead silent. My family stared at me as if I had grown a second head. Sterling's smile vanished. "Who are you?" he hissed, motioning to his guards. They raised their weapons. "I am the person who has been listening to your phone calls for 18 months, I said, my voice ice cold. "I am the person who froze your offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands 10 minutes ago. And I am the person who just authorized a kinetic strike on your boss's compound in Venezuela." "Kill her!" Sterling screamed. His guards raised their guns, but they never got a chance to fire. Crash! The skylights above us shattered inward. Stun grenades dropped from the ceiling, detonating with blinding flashes of light and deafening bangs. My family hit the floor, screaming. I didn't flinch. I put on the ear protection I had palmed from my pocket. Teams of men in full tactical gear rappelled from the rafters. The windows blew out as FBI SWAT and CIA Special Activities Division operators breached the room. Red laser dots danced across the chests of Sterling and his guards. "Drop it! Federal agents, drop it now!" It was over in 10 seconds. Sterling and his men were zip-tied and face down on the concrete. My family was huddled in a pile, sobbing, covering their heads. The lead tactical officer, a massive man named Commander Reynolds, walked up to me. He ignored my father. He ignored my brother. He stopped in front of me and snapped a crisp salute. "Director Bailey," he said, his voice booming, "the perimeter is secure. The targets are in custody. Assets have been recovered." I nodded. "Good work, Reynolds. Get these trash bags out of here. And get a medic to check on my father's heart rate." "Director?" Julian whispered from the floor. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, processing the tactical gear, the respect, the sheer violence of the rescue. I reached into my purse, not for a tissue, but for my badge. I clipped it onto my clerk dress. CIA, Directorate of Operations, Financial Crimes Division. I walked over to Sterling, who was being dragged away. "You made one mistake, Mikhail. You thought I was just a girl who filed papers. You didn't realize I was the one writing the history books." He spat at me, but the agents hauled him out. The warehouse quieted down. The tactical team set up a perimeter outside. I was left alone with my family. They slowly stood up, brushing the dust off their clothes. They looked at the shattered glass, the zip ties on the floor, and then at me. "Emilia," my mother asked, her voice trembling, You're with the CIA?" "Yes, Mother." "But the crop reports? The small apartment? The used car?" "Cover. All of it." Julian stared at the Honda Civic parked outside, realizing for the first time that the glass hadn't shattered when the flashbangs went off nearby. "You knew?" he asked. "You knew they were coming for us?" "I've been protecting this family for 6 years, Julian," I said, finally letting the anger seep into my voice. "While you mocked my clothes, I was stopping hackers from draining your trust fund. While you laughed at my car, I was stopping kidnappers from grabbing Clara in Paris. And while you called me useless, I was building the case that just saved Dad from dying in a federal penitentiary." My father sank into a chair, putting his head in his hands. He began to weep, not the panicked sobbing of earlier, but deep, heaving sobs of shame. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "My God, Emilia, I'm so sorry." I looked at them. The anger was there, but so was the exhaustion. I was tired of the double life. "The assets will be returned," I told them, my voice strictly professional. "Bailey Global is safe. Though your reputation will take a hit, you'll get the house back, but things are going to change." "What do you mean?" Clara asked, wiping mascara from her cheeks. I mean, I am done being the punching bag, I said. I am done being the disappointment. You wanted ambition? You just saw it. I walked toward the exit. I had a debriefing to attend.
"Where are you going?" my mother cried out. "To work," I said. "Real work." The drive back to DC was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the hum of the bulletproof tires on the asphalt. The aftermath was messy, as these things always are. The legal proceedings against the syndicate took months. My testimony was classified, but the results were public. My father was cleared of all charges, though he was fined for negligence. He had to step down as CEO, a move that was long overdue. We didn't lose everything, but we lost the excess. The private jet was sold, the summer home in the Hamptons was sold. They had to downsize, which meant living like normal upper-middle-class people instead of royalty. But the biggest change wasn't financial, it was the dynamic. I visited them a month later. I drove the Civic again. I still liked that car. When I pulled up, Julian didn't make a joke. He was washing his own car in the driveway, a modest SUV. He dropped the sponge when he saw me. He walked over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Hey, Em." "Hey, Jules." He looked at the ground, struggling with the words. I saw the news about the bust. They're calling it the biggest financial takedown in a decade. They didn't mention your name, obviously, but I knew. I nodded. I wanted to say... He paused, choking up. "I'm sorry about the car, about the job, about everything. I felt like a big man making you feel small, but I was the small one." "It's okay, Julian," I said, and I meant it. We were different people then. We went inside for dinner. The atmosphere was transformed. There was no mockery, no passive-aggressive comments about my shoes. My father asked me about my day, and for the first time, he actually listened when I said, "I can't talk about it," understanding that it wasn't because I was boring, but because what I did mattered. Clara sat next to me. "Can I ask you something?" she whispered. "Sure." "That move you did, with the badge, was that practiced?" I smiled, taking a sip of wine. "A little." She grinned. We ate in peace. They were still flawed, they were still a little vain, but they were alive. And for the first time in my life, when I looked around the table, I didn't see strangers. I saw a family that finally knew who I was. I wasn't the clerk. I wasn't the gray sheep. I was the shepherd. And sometimes the shepherd has to break a few legs to save the flock from the wolves. But tonight, the wolves were gone, and the flock was safe.